Hey guys, and welcome back. Today I want to talk to you about science and spirituality and how oftentimes these are treated as competing ideas or topics when really they're not. Before I get started, I want to give a big shout out and thank you to Nightshade. He created the intro for my podcast and he also did the mid-podcast promo, so I super appreciate him, and he's just been super supportive and encouraging for me on this podcast. Really appreciate it. He messaged me and was like, hey, when's your next podcast up? And I was like, yo, I'm recording it today. So I really just appreciate that support from him. And I'm going to be on his podcast in April. So stay tuned and check that out. I also wanted to let you guys know, sometimes I get a little crazy because people talk really slow on their podcasts. And so when I listen to podcasts, I will often listen to them at 1.5 speed or 2 times speed. And I recognize that I have a California drawl. Like, I've edited my YouTube videos and my podcast enough that I know what I sound like. So if I talk kind of slow to you, I suggest that you go ahead and put this at 1.5 speed or 2 times speed and listen to me faster. I am finding that doesn't change the pitch. It just speeds things up. It helps me out a lot when I'm listening to podcasts, and it might make the listening experience a little bit better for you too. I do try to keep things short, but I'm a rambler and that's kind of how it is. Anyways, so the reason why I decided to move this topic up on my list is because right now I'm seeing a lot of posts out there from people in the spiritual community who are saying things like, don't worry about our current global pandemic crisis, just think positive, just trust in the gods, do your prayers, do your rituals, do your spells, trust your immune system, trust in the goddess, that kind of stuff. And it makes me freaking crazy. There are people who are teaching like, this crystal grid will keep you from getting the coronavirus. This tea blend will keep you from getting the coronavirus. Here, I created a lotion with tea tree oil and lavender and it will keep you from getting the coronavirus. And those are all very nice thoughts, but we have science for a reason. And I love science. I am a big science nerd. I read a lot of science articles. I watch a lot of science YouTube. Like, for reals, I'm a huge SciShow fan and you have to just tear me away from it. I just love it so much. Science isn't an oppositional force to spirituality. Like, these are not competing disciplines, and I know it's treated that way by a lot of people in both the spiritual and scientific community, but that is not the way it is. These are two different areas of study, and acting like you're going to put all your faith in your spirituality and like, fuck science, never mind about that shit. I'm not going to worry about washing my hands. I'm not going to worry about social distancing. I'm not going to worry about all the scientific, normal healthcare precautions. I'm just going to put my faith in faith instead, is foolishness. Okay, it is just ridiculous and it's inconsiderate of other people. It's like if you were to go out to the freeway, and here in California we've got like the 405 and the 101 and the 1, and they all come out of LA. So if I were to go out to LA at 6 o'clock in the evening in rush hour traffic, and I were just to walk down the center lane of the highway and be like, think positive, I'm sure this will be fine. That's what we're talking about. That kind of foolishness. If you think it's fine to just go on a road trip and forget your seatbelt altogether, never mind airbags, don't worry about safety precautions, that's the kind of advice we're talking about right now. Seatbelts, airbags, safety precautions, not walking down the center of the freeway into oncoming traffic. Those are all common sense, science-y kind of precautions that we do so that we don't die, because we are here in mortal bodies. There's no amount of positive thinking that's going to make you immortal. And we have this weird fascination with the idea in the spiritual community, like not me personally, but we have this weird fascination with the idea that once you achieve a certain amount of spirituality, you become immortal or you become above physical reality, and that is not true. true at all. You are still a physical mortal being, and you are still having a physical experience. And so science is your friend. And if you are someone who currently puts their seatbelt on in a car and doesn't walk down the center of the freeway, then you are already acknowledging that. You've just been doing it for so long, you don't even think about it. Now, once upon a time, way back at the beginning of history, science and spirituality and all forms of study were just knowledge. They were just learning stuff. They were just studying. And as we learned more and more things, we as people started specializing because it got really complicated to know all the things that were currently known in the world. And so we had things branch off into their different disciplines. We started having philosophy and astronomy and mathematics, and we got religion, and we got science, and we got all of the sub-disciplines that those things have. So even science has its own little subcategories. We have biology, and we have chemistry, and we have astronomy, and we have so many sciences now. And that's just because we have so much knowledge. We've learned so much about our world that not everybody can know everything. And you don't see people competing and being like, oh yeah, well, mathematics has the ultimate truth, therefore English doesn't exist. That's not really a thing that happens. And so to have this conflict in spirituality and science is super weird too. But I know we have it. People really are like, oh yeah, well, I study science, therefore spirituality doesn't exist. And then spiritual people are like, oh, it's all about spirituality, fuck science. And so that is really frustrating. And I know that spirituality has been super, super denigrated, and that we got kicked out of academia and we aren't really respected as a knowledge anymore. And that's the way the world is right now. And that has changed throughout history. I'm sure it'll change again, but for those of us in the spiritual community, having a chip on our shoulders about it and then resenting everyone else is weird and goofy and kind of unevolved. We don't have to be like, well, fuck science, I'm just going to ignore that because they won't acknowledge the validity of what I do over here. So recognizing the validity of science is really, really important because especially in spirituality and witchcraft, science came from what we used to do. The mashing together of plants and creating herbal remedies, that was the foundation of science once upon a time. That was the basics of chemistry. That was the basics of biology. And those things came from what we used to do. As they became validated and refined and codified and tested and widely accepted and documented down to the smallest detail, then they became science. But until then, they were just like herbalism or homeopathy. And we didn't even have those words once upon a time. It was all just midwifery or alewifery or witchcraft or medicine making. We had all these other words for them, and it was all encompassing discipline. And so to now shun that knowledge that would have once upon a time belonged to us just because it's under the guise of science and medicine instead of spirituality is weird. So stop it. We should recognize that science is more knowledge. Spirituality is knowledge, and all knowledge is good. Also, there's a lot of people in spiritual practices like herbalism and who like essential oils and these kind of things who believe that because what they're using is all natural and because it comes from plants, and I hope you can hear the quotes around these words that I'm using, that they can't be harmful, that because things are all natural, they are inevitably healthy. Forget that plants can be poisonous and that our bodies really, really like balance. And so just because something is an essential oil doesn't mean that it's safe. They forget that, science has helped us learn and determine that, yes, these compounds from this plant or this particular part of this plant can actually be poisonous and can kill us instead of being helpful. And that's super essential knowledge. A lot of people try to use essential oils as cure-alls. I'm especially seeing this with products that are marketed as alternatives to hand sanitizers, like lotions that are supposed to be, antiviral spirals made from essential oils and stuff. And I know doTERRA has gotten a lot of heat over this from their salespeople who say that doTERRA essential oils are cure-alls and stuff like this. And essential oils can actually be super, super dangerous if they're used wrong. Yes, you can find essential oils that are pure and organic and they come from plants and stuff, but that does not mean that they're safe. Essential oils are basically just super, super concentrated plant parts, and plants can actually be super dangerous. And then if you have children or pets around, those essential oils are especially dangerous to pets and children. So like, I have cats and I love my essential oils, believe me, I do, but I have to be super, super careful about where I leave them and where I use them, because there are some essential oils are super, super poisonous for cats, especially if they get on the cat's skin and into their digestive systems, because cats have extremely delicate digestive systems and skins. So if they get the essential oils on their fur or their paws, they're gonna lick that stuff up and then they'll be in their digestive system, and that's no good. So for me, I basically have to use essential oils in my diffusers, and I have to be careful about exactly which ones I use, because even diffused in the air, it could kill my cats, especially because those things build up in their systems over time. Not to cause any panic, but like, just because something is all natural doesn't mean that you can just use it safely. And not to put too fine of a point on it, but we have plants that, like, if you just eat them, like if you just grab parts of them and eat them off the plant, they will kill you. Examples of these are like hemlock or nightshade or even freaking oleander. Like, we have oleander hedgerows, and if you go out and eat those flowers, they're gonna kill you. Like, you just grab them off the bush and eat them, you could be a dead human. Vitamin C poisoning is a real thing. If you take too many vitamin C vitamins, like tablet vitamins, you will die. You can die from ingesting too much water and not enough electrolytes. So just because something is all natural or healthy or whatever, like, you still have to be freaking mindful, okay? So yeah, so this is just a common misconception that a lot of people have in the spiritual community. So just, guys, be careful is what I'm saying. And so I'm not saying don't think positive, okay? I'm saying don't just think positive instead of also doing the responsible thing. And I don't mean that just in the case of this global pandemic. I'm talking about in all the cases. We need to recognize the validity of science and that we are not an oppositional force, but we are a force that works in tandem. Now, I remember when the internet was still young. Not like the baby internet that happened in the 80s, but the young worldwide social internet that happened in the very early 90s. I got onto the internet in 1992, and like the early days of AOL, when we still had to pay per minute and dial that shit up. And I remember local BBSs and all that stuff. Back when the internet was baby, before chat rooms even started, when we were still talking to each other on message boards, right? And like 4 people in your local area could sign on to AOL at a time. So way back in the day. And people were saying, we finally have created the Akashic Library here on Earth. So for those of you who are not familiar with the Akashic Library, it's this concept or idea that all of the knowledge that humanity has is stored in this great spiritual library on another plane or dimension of existence, along with all the memories, thoughts, and feelings that anyone has ever had, including all of our past lives. And so when the internet came to be and we were able to share all the information, I remember when the encyclopedias were free and online still, and people were stoked. We could look things up. Anything you wanted to know in these completely, totally static articles that were not updated. And people were so excited. They said, we finally have the Akashic Library here on Earth. And then a couple years later, they were like, okay, hold up. Now it's getting crazy. Everybody is putting all of their thoughts and their feelings and their memories online. It's getting crowded. How are we supposed to tell the difference between what is useful and what is kind of garbage and junk? And those of us who had been studying, the Akashic Library and spirituality and people's thoughts and things, were just kind of like, yeah, that's still kind of the Akashic Library, guys. Like, there's a lot of junk in it. If you're going to be storing all of humanity's thoughts and ideas and feelings and memories, a lot of it is going to be junk. Storing everything that everybody has ever thought, known, and felt is a lot of information. That's just a lot of stuff. And a lot of it is going to be pretty useless. And it's kind of the same thing when I'm doing tarot readings for people, right? And somebody wants to know, what is this other person thinking right now in this moment? You don't want to know. Because most of the time we're thinking garbage. We're having garbage thoughts that we ourselves don't even care about. Like, how many nonsense thoughts do you have in a minute? And they're just stupid things like, what's that noise? I think I want a Cheeto. Does this look silly on me? What did I just do with my nose? Is my foot itching? Is it still itching? Is that the third time it's itched this minute? Do I need to worry about this? Is that something biting me? I don't know what's going on right now. Like, there's a lot of nonsense thoughts. You're like, maybe I shouldn't go to that thing. No, I'm totally going to the thing. Obviously, I'm going to that thing. You don't want to hear somebody's internal monologue moment to moment. Definitely not second to second. So when someone asks me, like, what are they thinking right now, right this minute? I'm like, no, you don't want to know what they're thinking right now. The odds that somebody is thinking of you right now in this minute are not that great. They're probably thinking they want a snack, or they're probably thinking about how uncomfortable their clothes are. Or they're thinking about whatever show they're watching. Like, we have so much nonsense, garbage thoughts. It's not even funny. It's much more useful to think about the conclusions that someone finally comes to, the decisions that they finally make, and the actions that they decide to take. If you sit down and think about what happens in your own thoughts, in your own brain from moment to moment, that's a fun exercise to do. Those of you who practice mindfulness already, you're probably already nodding along to this podcast thinking like, yeah, there's a lot of garbage thoughts that happen in my brain. Like, one moment I'm thinking about, I wonder what my cat is doing. The next moment I'm thinking about what happened on Lucifer last night. Like, it's just a lot of garbage and weirdness. And then, like, sometimes I'm just comparing 2 shades of green and wondering which one I like more. So our minds are like really weird things. And if we're going to store all those thoughts in the Akashic Library or the internet or whatever, then we're going to end up with a lot of garbage. And I think that we're just discovering that right now. And we're not even putting all of that on the internet yet. We're just selectively shouting into the void when we think that something's interesting or we find something overwhelming or whatever. And so the internet is getting very crowded, and it's not even all of humanity's experiences yet. But wait, we'll get there, okay? Anyway, so the Akashic Library is an example of science and physical reality and spiritual reality coming closer together, and how these things are not so much separate as they are alike. Now, I know there are some people, I've had like a million atheist friends in my life, and I love my atheist friends, I really, really do, but I've had some really bad ones who are no longer friends at this point, who tell me that science has disproven the existence of gods. And I love science, I really, really do, but at this point in time, science can't even approach the question of gods. There's no means by which to test their existence. So science can't even ask the question. They can't even make the test. My spiritual beliefs, like whether or not there's energy and stuff, like that stuff is already proven. We know that everything in the world, everything in existence is energy. That is absolute scientific fact. There's all sorts of different kinds of energy, and we know it all.
Hey, this is Nightshade, host of Flatline and Beatline, and you're listening to The Educated Witch. If you like what you hear, then support this podcast any which way that you can and help it break through the noise.
Okay, so I just got interrupted by Kane, who decided that he needed to walk all the way across my desk and knock all of my tarot decks on the ground and knock over my microphone and a bunch of other things. So I've lost my train of thought. But what I think I was saying is that science hasn't figured out a way to test all of my spiritual practices and beliefs to see if they have an effect yet. They can't test my spells to see if they work. They can't test my meditation to see if it has the effects that I think it does. They can't test my psychic ability to see if it's having the effect that I think it's having. All of these things require, double-blind tests. They require a certain amount of objectivity, and because it also requires human conditions and human interactions and a shit ton of variables, it cannot be tested yet. I do think that science is going to get there eventually, and I do think we're going to find out answers at some point, but that point is not today, so we're going to carry on. But for the moment, science can't even address those questions. And I love science. I think science is doing a brilliant job. I think it's expanding super, super rapidly. I freaking love the shit out of science. I love the new knowledge we're gaining every single day. The knowledge that science gains absolutely informs my spiritual practice and how I approach the world, how I frame my spells, how I do my practice, how I interact with the land and the land spirits, and all these things. It informs my environmentalism. It informs my activism. It informs so many things that I do. But my spiritual practice can't be tested by science yet, and so it is what it is, and my spiritual practice can only be tested by myself, and so with my own authority and my own experiences. And yes, we call these things anecdotes at this point, but that's okay. Psychology itself is a pretty soft science that relies entirely on case studies at this point, so spirituality is in much the same camp. So I'm going to carry on with my spiritual practice, and I'm going to carry on loving and adoring the science things that I'm learning, and I'm going to keep evolving them together. My spiritual practice and my daily life and my scientific knowledge are evolving constantly because I'm a human, and that's what I do. I learn and I move forward in life, and the things that I do are constantly changing and growing and developing in new exciting ways, and I think that's super exciting, and I think that's the way that we should do things. But I'm not going to walk down the freeway towards oncoming traffic in the middle of rush hour and expect my faith to protect me, because I know better. Because my faith has also brought to me my spirituality, my gods, my reality, the life that I'm living. Those things have also brought to us science, and I'm a human and I have science for a tool, and I kind of feel like my gods are going to look at me if I do that and be like, dude, that's the choice you made. You have free will and you chose to put yourself in harm's way, and like, we have to respect that. You knew what you were doing. So at some point we have to take responsibility for our own damn foolishness, and if we're going to be putting ourselves in harm's way, then we accept the consequences that come with it. So please, absolutely don't do stupid things. Do smart things. Respect scientists. Listen to what they tell you about how the world they know works, and then reinforce what they tell you with your spiritual beliefs. So, wash your hands. Practice the social distancing. Don't do unsafe things. Follow the instructions. We're moving into more lifetime advice now. Do the safe things. Do the things that you are taught you're supposed to do by science and empirical evidence, and then back those things up and reinforce them with your spiritual practice as well. So yes, think positive, but also be safe, okay? That's my point. Don't rely entirely on science, and don't rely entirely on spirituality. You have to use both of these things. And I'm only addressing those two fields right now because that's what I decided to focus on, but I absolutely think that you should be working your art and your math and your literature and everything else into your whole freaking lifestyle, because we need beautiful, well-rounded lives. So your physical practices, I don't want to say exercise, I want to say physical practices here, because I think that your body likes to be interacted with, and how you choose to do that is up to you. But your physical practices matter, your creative practices matter, your studious practices, whatever you decide to study, that matters, your spiritual practices, your social practices, they all matter, and we should all have beautiful, well-rounded lives that are fulfilling and that support our lifestyle in a variety of ways. So absolutely do that. We are given common sense, we are given science for a reason, and we are given spirituality for a reason too. And we're humans, we're naturally creative creatures. It's only natural for us to seek out knowledge, and there's no reason why we would deny ourselves a source of knowledge when we have access to it. Those of us on the spiritual side of things, let's bridge the gap. Let's embrace science. Let's embrace our physical reality. Let's acknowledge that we are mortal creatures living a finite life. At least this life is finite, even though we may reincarnate again and again and again, depending on your belief system. And so we should take care with those precious, precious lives, but we can also reinforce those things with our spirituality and make life better and longer and healthier and more beautiful in the process. So let's be smart, let's be wise, let's treat each other well, and remember to do things in an intelligent and resourceful way, using the resources that we've been given. And that we are also very, very fucking messy. And that every time we learn or experience something new, we're going to do it in a very, very messy way. And that's just how humans work. So I hope that this brief little podcast is helpful. And, I believe in humanity, and I think that we have a lot of good things going here. And I think that as long as we keep working together and doing our very best and helping each other out and focusing on moving forward, we create a better society and better selves every single day. So that's my focus, and I hope that some of you or most of you are kind of focused on something similar too. So that's it. That's all I'm going to say today. I hope you guys are doing well out there, and I will see you next time. Bye.